Hello, Big Dreamers! Your lady Vitamin Katie is here. I have such a special guest, Anna, on my podcast / video. This is going to be such a really valuable chat. So Anna and I met during the Embodied Rebel Academy, the ERA, with two of the most magical, powerful women in the history of forever, Brandi and Cara. Please do check them out. I'll link them down below. So this academy is a food freedom and body image coaching program. So I got to meet like-minded people, and now we are food freedom and body image coaches. Anna, oh, your content, you are really pushing the message. You really know what you are doing. I am so inspired by you and your story. And I actually would love to copy you and the Food Psych podcast. Everybody check out that podcast. Let's hear it, Anna. I know we're just diving into it. You haven't even said a word yet. We're getting into this. What was your relationship with food like growing up?
Well, first of all, what a hype introduction. Like, I'm so energized right now. That was awesome.
I'm too hype. I'm too hype for people. I hope they enjoy
No,
it.
it's great. I love it. My relationship with food growing up, where do I start? So, growing up, I had not the best relationship with food. I would say, like, my early childhood, it was fine, but my dad was very, I guess, like, very strict about food. So, he claimed to be health conscious, but I think he took it to a level that was just a little too obsessive. And basically I felt like I was living with the food police my entire life. And it was cool because, like, my mom had a great relationship with food, and she was entirely neutral about food, and she's probably the most intuitive eater that I know. But still, having my dad there was such a huge influence, and I really sought after his approval. So I was constantly aware of, like, what was healthy versus unhealthy, and I put that in quotation marks because I think it was to a point where it wasn't actually healthy to be thinking about food in such a black and white way. And I just remember, like, judging friends for how they were eating when I was a kid because of these ideas that my dad had instilled in me. And, he was very fat phobic. Like, we'd be out in public and he would be fat shaming people, like, under his breath all the time. And that, of course, had a huge impact on me. So I learned from a very young age that I should not be fat, or I am lesser of a person and my dad won't love me. Like, I'm not worthy of love. I am a burden on society if I'm in a bigger body. And I truly believe that. There was no question about it. Like, that's really what I believed. And I didn't have an entirely obsessive relationship with food until my sophomore year of high school. And that was when I got my first serious running injury. And I was getting injured all the time. I just don't think my body's, like, built for distance running, even though I pushed through it anyways. I couldn't run anymore, and it was the one thing that gave me confidence and gave me an outlet to focus on, because my home life was so stressful, school was really stressful for me. I was dealing with anxiety. So when running was taken away from me for months, I decided to just start focusing on food. And I remember sitting in my sports medicine class, and my teacher had no reason to be talking about this, but she was just bringing up the paleo diet. And I remember she was going on and on about how, like, when she went to college, she put on all this weight and then, like, couldn't get it off. And then she went on the paleo diet and all the weight fell off and her life changed for the better. And of course, me as a young high school girl with body image issues, I was like, oh, I need to learn more about this. So I remember staying after class that day and I asked her about it, and she told me all about it. And I went on Pinterest that night and made a board about the paleo diet and just became fully obsessed. And it was, like, the only thing I thought about. And it wasn't even, like, the food itself that was unhealthy for me. Like, I think it was contextual. It was the mindset that I had around it. It was, oh, I'm doing this to lose weight. And it was like I was not only restricting the types of food that I could eat, but I was also restricting the amount of calories I could eat. And I was just hungry all the time. And life was just hard. It sucked. I was tired. I was irritable. I hated my life. I hated myself. My social life completely just went out the window. And it was the only thing I was focusing on. And then finally my running injury went away and I started running again. And so I kind of stepped away from obsessing about food because I knew as an athlete I had to eat a lot of food in order to run fast. And that's like all I cared about was just like being a good runner. So thankfully I was able to kind of like step away from that obsession a little bit. But then when I got to college, I had another running injury. And this time it was so bad that it had lasted for like 2 years. And I ended up just like quitting the cross country team at my college and again just went head first into food restriction. I started counting calories. I started restricting the types of food that I could eat. And it was just basically a mirror image of what I had gone through in high school. And I had no energy. I had no social life. Like I didn't party at all when all of my friends were partying. I didn't go out. I only hung out with my boyfriend, and that was because we lived together. I mean, I really was so isolated and I was losing so much weight, and I was just like both physically and spiritually a small person. Like I just had no personality. I had no hobbies, and it was really, really dark and depressing. Um, so that was my negative journey with food.
Ooh, thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably and openly and honestly about your history growing up with food. I wrote down three, actually four things that I wanted to touch upon because I relate to you, and I know you know who you are. I know my clients relate so much to everything that you shared, really. And one of the first things that you shared was this idea of judgment from others around your food choices, especially a parental figure that is there to want the best for you, right? These parents that we have, of course, we are going to probably receive a lot of feedback from them because they believe that it's their job to make sure that they're doing what they can to best support us in living our best lives, right? So from their perspective, they're doing the best that they can with the knowledge and experience that they have. And when it comes to relationships, and another thing that you touched upon after talking about that was worth. So thinking about where does our worth lie, right? And how it's so intertwined with food, and how we can really question this when it's so entrenched in our society around what we look like and what we're eating, and having that really wrap in with our self-worth. Um, and I can imagine, yeah, with different relationships, getting feedback, whether it's from a parent, a friend, teacher, whatever it is, really having the capacity and perspective now to see above that and see where they're coming from, as opposed to really taking it personally and taking these things on. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope whoever's listening can reflect on that and reflect on the relationships in their lives and what people are saying, and think, okay, wow, is this something that is the truth, or is it a belief that can be have another perspective around, and that I can take on and be like, okay, cool, right? And take it how is empowering for you. But the last thing I wrote down, what you said, that is so key to everything with life is our focus. And you were saying how it was just taking up your headspace too much, right? Your mindset was like so focused negatively around food. And everybody listening, I do question my clients, and I'm sure you question yourself now as well. What takes up my focus most of the day? What takes up my headspace most of the day? Is this empowering or no? Is this what I want to be focusing on or no? And you were noticing, just based on your story, moving through the relationships, the worth, the focus. And then you lastly touched upon how you became such a small person. You were I wrote self-love, but it really does, yeah, it comes down to us having the capacity to love ourselves so much, right? That we're able to be bigger, be ourselves, be, right? Oh man, thank you for sharing your story. I hope that people feel as relieved and understood and accepted and connected listening to your vulnerability. Thank you so much. So, with all of this experience, I know you're an amazing freaking coach, and the holidays are coming up. We're going to be intertwining with people who are questioning us, who have different perspectives. We're going to be maybe eating more than normal on a routine when there's all these holidays and things. And I would love to hear what is your coaching around people who are just trying to be free with food, and meanwhile they're still wrapping their self-worth around all of this, and people who are struggling with that.
And do you mean like specific to the holidays or just in general?
Just in general, I feel like the holidays, it just kind of exacerbates the problem. I definitely get a lot of DMs and people feeling really crappy about themselves around the holidays more than other times, which is
Mm-hmm.
so sad considering how the holidays are a time to be celebrated and indulge and just have fun, and how people who, yeah, when we're wrapping our self-worth in our capacity to eat a certain amount or eat certain types of foods only, we can see how that happens. And I definitely, like, not gonna lie, um I have clients who it takes them, it seems to me like I for sure help my clients a lot work through this, but it's something that it's just so intertwined in their belief system that it can be hard to at least in a short amount of time, it can be hard to really get them to switch that perspective, to switch that belief. And I would love to hear your tips and your
Yeah.
coaching.
Yeah. So this might sound a little morbid, but just bear with me. One of the first questions I ask my clients, because this is a question that I asked myself and that really helped me sort of zoom out and gain some perspective, is if I was on my deathbed, like, would I be okay with how I'm going about my relationship with food and my body? Like, am I really gonna care or be happy with myself with the fact that, like, I spent my entire life, or however long, anytime at all, worrying so much about what I'm eating and what I look like? Again, I truly believe like nutrition and health are important, and that's just my belief system. Like, that's, health is something that matters to me. I don't think everyone has an obligation to care about their health, but like, to me, I do. And I would be so sad on my deathbed looking back knowing that I wasted my life on something that actually didn't end up serving me at all. So that's the first question I ask people. The next question I ask people is, what do you believe in? Like, what does matter to you? What are your passions in life? And not once has any client of mine said, oh, my passion is looking good and making sure that people find me attractive and focusing on what size pants I wear or whatever. Like, never once do they say that that's part of their value system for their personal beliefs. And I'll often ask the question, like, do you think it's right that we put so much pressure on women especially, but just people in general, to like fit a certain aesthetic? And almost everybody says, no, I disagree with that. I think that that's wrong. And so here we are operating from a belief system that we don't even believe in. And so I think it's so important to get clear on your values and ask yourself, like, are my actions in alignment with what I actually believe in? Because the thing is, yes, our society is based in diet culture, unfortunately, but so long as we're not questioning that, like, we're operating within that and only feeding it. And it sucks because, like, the responsibility shouldn't be on us, because truly it's capitalism that's keeping it alive, but we are feeding it, and we have to be the change if we want to see any change. So I'll often ask people, like, what would your ideal relationship with food and body look like? And often people are like, I don't want to think about it as much. I want to be able to like take care of myself, but not obsess about nutrition. I want to be able to have fun when I move my body. And I'm like, great, awesome. Like, let's do that. Like, you have the ability to do that, but it does take reprogramming your brain. So I feel like a lot of my coaching is just about unlearning the learning that we've gone through.
Could you tell more about that? More about the programming and unclenching that? And I do have some follow-up questions, and I love talking about death, but I think it's actually very positive. But let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I feel like I could go on and on about this, but I will just give a few examples of tools that I'll give clients. So one example is I'll ask them to journal every single day at least 3 things that they love about their body that have nothing to do with appearance, right? So shifting from this idea of having like this pressure to love what your body looks like, and instead focusing on what it can do for you and showing gratitude towards that. So you can either write this in a journal, or you can put it on sticky notes and put it on your mirror, or like set little reminders in your phone and they'll pop up on your phone. But things like, I am so grateful that my legs allow me to climb mountains. I'm so thankful that I get to taste food with my tongue. I'm so thankful I get to like hug my partner, things like that. And really just acknowledging everything our body lets us do. And it's crazy that we get so out of touch with that. You know, even though we do so many amazing things every day, it's like we forget to acknowledge it, right? And then another thing is just continuing to revisit your why. Revisit, like, why do you want to heal your relationship with food and body? Like, what is that going to open up for you? And every time you have a thought that's based in diet culture, or if you have an eating disorder that's based in your eating disorder, recognizing that that's what it is and that you are not your thoughts, and pausing for a second and going, okay, I hear that thought. What do I actually believe? And like having this dialogue with yourself, because so often we hear the thought and then we just like immediately identify with it instead of taking the time to question it. So it's really just about like slowing down and reflecting. And I feel like journaling is a huge aspect. But just having these reminders for yourself, like, okay, today I need to set an intention and make sure that whenever a diet culture or eating disorder thought comes into my brain, that I'm questioning it and I'm having a conversation with it. And you have a rebuttal to it. Like if the eating disorder voice or the diet culture voice says your thighs are too big, you can step back and go like, actually, no, even if you don't believe it, like at first you might not actually feel like you believe it, but just even saying, no, I disagree with you. Like my legs are perfect as they are and they allow me to do all of these things. Just writing that out, just saying that starts to reprogram your brain, and eventually it'll become automatic and you really will believe it.
Mic drop. Yes. That's exactly what we all need to hear during the holidays. My lordy. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. I love this because we've all been so programmed with these beliefs. I for sure. And like I said at your retreat, oh my gosh, everybody needs to do a virtual retreat with Anna and me. Like Elle will be there. Anyways, I love this idea of witnessing what beliefs we have around our appearance or around food, all these beliefs. And I came to the conclusion that, wow, I actually had the belief that if I had visible muscle, if I was stronger, I would be more successful as a coach. I would be more respected. I would be more inspiring as a person. And also noticing like, okay, if I have this belief, what ways of being does that allow me to be in the world? Like I have so many beliefs too that I'm not really conscious of, right? It's crazy how we'll live our lives, we'll do what we're doing, not realizing that this programming that we've been grown. Have you ever seen a rom-com where the main character is not a skinny white woman with big boobs? Like these little subtle things make it so that we think that we need to look a certain way without it being direct. And it's really takes time to undo that programming and to become aware of that. So thank you for allowing everybody listening right now to question themselves, to question these beliefs, to question and to not beat ourselves up about it. We have these beliefs not because there's something wrong with us, but because of course, like, let's come from a compassionate place and rub that inner child on the back and say, it's okay, you know, I have compassion and empathy for these beliefs that are coming up and they're not serving us anymore, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing this, Anna. Those are really, really amazing and beneficial and useful tools for us all to use. I'm so excited. I do want to circle back to being very hype about talking about death. I love thinking about death. I actually remember listening to a Lewis Howes podcast, The School of Greatness, and he mentions it often, actually, that there's an app that you can get that reminds you 5 times a day that you're going to die. And what would we do if we were reminded 5 times a day that we're going to die? Heck, I would probably tell this guy that I love him. I would probably go after this job that I actually want. I would probably, you know, we would actually probably do what we want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because who knows, we could all die tomorrow. So that's a really empowering for me. It's empowering for me to think about. So I invite people to think about that. And I question my clients, hey, how do you want to be remembered at your funeral? Are people going to say, her abs though? Like, I liked her because she was just, you know, her abs were showing, and that I love that about her. Like,
Right.
really, is that how you want to be remembered? Or just like you said, with what do you value, what are you passionate about? I want people to remember me at my funeral for being authentic, for being fun, for being somebody that allowed me to feel comfortable around. Whatever it is, it has nothing to do with your thigh gap, right? Like, is that really how you want to be remembered? So thank you for talking about death.
Mm-hmm.
And I also am excited to circle back to your relationship with food growing up and how it stemmed from your relationship with your dad and feeling like you were overthinking about not only your food but other people's food, being that food police a little bit towards yourself and others. And I would love to hear, with all of this work that you've done and with your clients, how would you navigate different relationships now? Like, are you going to see your dad during the holidays? Is this going to be something that is still hard for you? What do you do around that?
I'm really glad you circled back to this because I almost like interrupted you to like continue that conversation. So I'm glad we're back on this topic because my relationship with my dad was such a pivotal part of my healing journey. And we did go through a period where we didn't talk for 2 years. And I remember I told him, I like wrote him a letter. And in that letter, I told him like, hey, the way that you treated food when I was a kid was like a factor in me having an eating disorder. And I'm not blaming you, but I just like need you to acknowledge it. And it didn't end well. We didn't talk for like 2 years, but then after 2 years, I did a lot of work on myself. I worked with a life coach, and I got to the place where I just recognized my dad was a person, and he really was trying his best. Like you said, like parents are out here really thinking that they're doing the best for their kids, and my dad thought that the way he approached food was for my benefit. And just being able to recognize that took all the pressure off of me, and I really just didn't have to worry about it anymore because I recognized he really was trying his best. And even though it was unhelpful, I have to acknowledge him as a human for trying because he did have good intention, and the rest is out of my control. And with that mindset, yeah, maybe there's not a lot of closure, but also it's really freeing and really liberating because now you are not subject to somebody else. I'm no longer subject to whether or not he apologizes for or recognizes it, because I know for myself what happened there, and like it was within my power to move forward and heal my relationship with food, whether or not he apologized or whatever. Yeah.
Really, thank you. I'm so curious though, when are you going to see him over the holidays? Like, what happens now when you do you eat together? Does he still make comments? Does he not? How does that dynamic go down?
Yeah, so I am in such a strong place now where I can handle diet talk pretty well. And I know that for a lot of people, that's really, really hard. And it was really hard for me for a long time too. So I guess I'll kind of flash back to when it was hard for me. And there's 3 ways that you can go about diet talk. The first way is you can just physically remove yourself. So if there's a triggering situation for you where someone's talking about diet, someone's making a comment about your body, you can excuse yourself. You can go to the bathroom. You can just leave. You can say you have to take a phone call, whatever it is, just to physically escape. Because sometimes, especially at the beginning of our healing journey, it really is just too much to like engage that conversation. And although it may be like not ideal to just like leave, sometimes that's what you need, and you have full permission to do that. The second option is to just change the subject. And this is what I use a lot with my dad, because with someone like my dad, I love him, but I also have tried to have these diet culture talks with him, and he's so far removed from it that like I've just realized it's not worth my time anymore to try to convince him, and it's also not my responsibility to try to convince him. So I'll often just try to change the subject, or I'll just completely turn the conversation, and I'll just ask him about something else. And it usually works. So you can use that one too. The third option is to like stand up for yourself and say something and go, hey, I'm trying to heal my relationship with food right now. Diet talk is really unhelpful for me and is actually feeding the problem, however you want to word it. But you can say like, hey, those comments are actually really hurtful to me. You can share that you are experiencing a difficult relationship with food and body image if you're comfortable doing that. But those are the three main options that I give people. And it usually goes in that sequential order, like as you heal your relationship with food. So like now that I'm in a strong place, I know with my dad, it's not worth it to have those conversations, but I have had conversations like with my grandmother, for example. She was making comments about my body and like my sister's body. And I told her like, hey, those comments are really unhelpful and actually really harmful. And we ended up having an awesome conversation. And she was like, I had no idea. Like, my mind is so blown right now. Like, thank you for talking to me. And not everyone's going to be that positive, but you know, if you're in a place where you can handle negative reactions from people, a lot of times it's worth it.
That was so helpful. That was so helpful. Thank you for sharing this, Anna. I know I can think of a few of my own clients that are going to be like, oh, yes, yes, thank you. Needed this for real. Thank you for sharing this. Everybody, you have the capacity to take responsibility for your relationship with food, for your headspace, and for doing what you need to do around relationships and creating space, creating boundaries, and maybe voicing what needs to be voiced so that you can live in peace. For real. Thank you for sharing that. I do want to talk a little bit about when it comes to, I think is actually, you know what, let's like what direction do I want to take this. Well, this was extremely helpful, I think, for people to navigate their relationship with food, reprogramming, figuring out why they're holding on to that belief that weight has a lot to do with their worth, and feeling anxiety around food during the holidays. Is there anything else that you would like to add around that I didn't ask you about?
I mean, I have a full list of tips for people during the holidays. And I recently made a video, if you guys want to check it out on my YouTube. It's called Anna Wegner Coaching. But I have a video about like how to navigate Thanksgiving, and all of the tips in that also apply to literally any other holiday, especially holidays with a lot of food, which is most holidays. But the other tips that I have are, just like eat normally, like treat the holiday as a normal day of eating, because when we deprive ourselves, one, it's probably going to make us more anxious, makes us think about food more, and we're not going to be able to make clear-headed decisions about our eating choices when we're operating from a state of deprivation. So the first tip I have is like eating beforehand. The second one I have is like eating mindfully and just being really present with the food and engaging all of your senses and eating slowly and making sure that you enjoy every single bite, because oftentimes when we're in a social environment, when there's a lot of people, when there's a lot of food, it's really easy to get distracted and not pay attention to the food and not actually enjoy it. And when you're not present with it and you're not becoming emotionally satisfied, you actually won't feel full. Even if you eat a lot of food, your brain still wants that emotional satisfaction. It still wants that pleasure from food. So really making sure that you just take a moment to take a deep breath and again, engage all of your senses can be so, so helpful. Another tip I have is don't dwell on your food choices. The holidays, like Katie said earlier, it's all about making memories. So again, like when you're 99, do you want to remember obsessing about the 3 cookies that you ate, or do you want to focus on the memories that you made? Because the truth is, like, you're not going to care years from now how you ate that day. Nobody who's there is going to care about how you ate. No one's going to care about what weight you were, what you looked like. Like, truly, people are going to remember how you made them feel. And I think that's so important to remember. Avoid all compensatory behaviors at all costs. Again, like any type of restriction, whether it's pre-restriction, like you're planning on burning off the calories the next day, or you skip meals before the meal, like I mentioned earlier, that can all lead to binge eating and again, keep us in this anxious state and take us out of the moment, right? Like if we're thinking about restricting, we're not going to be actually present at the holiday event, which is the whole point of holidays. And again, like food is meant to be enjoyed. One day or even 1 week of eating is not going to make or break your health. In fact, like making memories that have emotional and social connection is so important for your health. I forget where I saw this. I've seen it a few times, but there have been studies that show the number one determining factor of longevity is social health. So I think we often forget that. And we often make health about this thing that's solely about like what you eat and how much you exercise. And then the one last tip I have here is say no to food pushers. I don't know if anybody else experiences this. My dad is this way, which is so interesting because of the way he treated food with me. But he will push food on you until you say yes. And he won't stop. And he's always hungry. Like he's a very active person and like just has a super high metabolism and is like can just eat and eat and eat all day and thinks that everybody else is the same exact way. So he just assumes that everybody's hungry all the time. And I have to be like, no, I'm not hungry. So just being okay with the fact that like you're allowed to say no if someone's pushing food on you and it's not rude. It's totally okay. Like if you don't want to eat something, like don't eat it, you know, like choose the food you like. If there's a whole array of food at Christmas or whatever, don't feel like you need to get a little bit of everything. Like only eat the foods that you like. You have no obligation to eat anything else. You deserve to make that a pleasurable experience.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I definitely relate to the food pushers. That was a great last tip. Those were amazing tips. Everybody, I hope you go back, take some notes, really soak that all in. Those were great tips. Man, and it's funny too what you're saying about make sure you do eat beforehand, make sure that you do the mindful eating is so important, to take a deep breath, and whether it be during the holidays or your everyday life, to eat beforehand. Right, like set yourself up for a great day so that you're not distracted. And when you eat, maybe you're distracted, I get it, people are busy, maybe you have to eat in the car, like whatever it is, you do have the capacity to take a deep breath and shift your focus to how this food is tasting, and et cetera, instead of like really being anxious and not even noticing that you're eating at all. We can all take 1 second to really focus our attention on what we're eating. So thank you. Those are amazing tips for both, yes, the holidays and honestly, everyday life. I think that was great. Is there anything else? You're so full of wisdom.
I actually do have a couple more things. So I know that I can relate to this, just like the anxiety of holidays. I remember Thanksgiving was my least favorite holiday. I hated it. And it was solely because I had so much fear around food. So one other thing I wanted to say was acknowledge your fear, acknowledge any other emotions that you're having. Because again, like emotions and thoughts and feelings, they don't define you. And we often identify with these emotions and we get like really caught up in it and we try to make it go away and we don't let it exist. And what that does is it just makes it fester and grow even more because those emotions want to move through you. And the more we push them away, the more we resist them, the more they persist. Quote from Brandi. Um, so just know that whatever you're feeling is temporary, but the memories that you'll make are forever. So you can exist with fear. And something that we mentioned in the retreat yesterday, and I also got this, I don't know if it was Brandi or Cara, so much wisdom in those two women, amazing. But I think it was Brandi who said, you know, fear can be in the car, but let it be in the passenger seat rather than the driver's seat. It can still be there. You can still exist while these emotions are happening, but it doesn't have to be driving the car.
Oh, her analogies are always so good.
I know, she's brilliant. Yeah.
Wow. Yes. And that kind of ties back to what I was saying before around having compassion and empathy when these thoughts and feelings do come up. It's exactly like you were saying. It's like instead of being mad at ourselves and like something's wrong with us, like what's wrong with me? Why am I going through these diet culture thoughts? Why am I beating myself up? Why having this fear, having this anxiety, it does exacerbate the problem, right? The resistance, it does cause it to persist, but it didn't really land for me. I love the Aunt Ida analogy too that Brandi says. It's like these feelings of of anxiety around food are going to be like banging on the door, and you can ignore it, right? We can shun Aunt Ida, and she's just gonna bang louder and louder and louder, right? If we keep saying, oh, I don't want this right now, like this is so annoying, right? It kind of exacerbates the problem instead of saying, oh wow, anxiety, okay, cool, like I see you, and then you open the door, you say, hi Aunt Ida, like come in, whatever. And having that compassion for Aunt Ida, having that compassion for anxiety, like literally I actually do a practice with myself where I'll internally cuddle my thoughts, which like it sounds so weird, but I'll cuddle that voice in my head. I'll cuddle that fear and anxiety. I'm like, oh, okay, like I hear you, I see you, and it feels so nice. It feels like I'm being hugged, right? Instead of feeling like I'm being slapped. Okay, so I hope that people can take that on, and it's so funny, that concept was actually really difficult for me to grasp. It took me a while to like actually make that connection that it's okay to feel, and to have compassion around it is going to be more beneficial than like really resisting it. So give yourself time, everybody. Let those words sink in, whether it happens today or in a couple of weeks, that you really let that land for you. Who knows the timeline, but it's gonna happen. We can all have that compassion, empathy for all these things. Yay, I love crying and taking deep breaths. I do have one final question, but I love how it's been going with me asking if you have any more you'd like to share. Where can people find you? What else do you have going on? And yeah, of course, if there's anything more to share, all of your wisdom is appreciated.
Just one last tidbit on the acknowledging emotions. Another analogy that I learned in the ERA is just viewing emotions, thoughts, and feelings as sentient beings, because they are. Like everything is just energy. And one thing Brandi would always tell us is like, how would sadness talk about you? Like if they were to talk about how you treated them, how would depression talk about you? What would anger have to say? What would anxiety have to say? Like, are they going to say that you took care of them and that you acknowledged them and that you gave them space to exist? Or are they going to say that you abused them and you ignored them and you tried to shove them down? Like, how would they talk about you? I think that's a really important question to ask. And it might sound like a little woo-woo, but really if you just zoom out and just view everything as energy, that's what it is. And those feelings and thoughts deserve to be treated with kindness because they are neutral, but we as humans put meaning on those thoughts and feelings.
Oof, that was so good. That was so good. Oh wow.
I can't take full credit. That's all the ERA, man.
Well, same. Yeah, all of these thoughts, all of these things, of course, like we're getting from yeah. But that was amazing. Maybe Brandi did come up with that. I don't know, but that was amazing. And if it didn't land before, I probably just landed for people with that one. That was a good analogy, I guess you could say. Cool. Well, where can people find you? Everybody, if you don't already follow Think Outside the Bod, is it think dot? Do you want to say it?
Yeah, saying it out loud is always so annoying because there's so many dots in between, but my Instagram is at think.outside.the.bod. You can also find me on YouTube at Anna Wegner Coaching. And yeah, I also just started my own podcast and I recorded Katie before we did this interview. And that podcast is on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and I'm working on getting it on all other platforms too. But that's called Think Outside the Bod. And yeah, you can always DM me if you just want to reach out, if you have any questions. I'm always open to a conversation. I mean, truly, like, people think I just say that, but honestly, like, I'll just hit people up on Instagram and be like, hey, what's your relationship with food like? And they're like, why are you asking? I'm like, I really just want to talk to you. And they're like, okay. So truly, I love having those conversations. You can email me too at annawegnercoaching@gmail.com and my website at annawegnercoaching.com as well.
Woohoo! Yes, this queen, amazing. Thank you. Like I said, follow Think Outside the Bod with dots in between. I'm so inspired by you and grateful for you. Thank you for taking the time. And one final question: how do you empower yourself?
Ooh, oh my gosh. That's a great question. How do I empower myself? I think just showing myself compassion has been the biggest thing. Just not being so hard on myself. That has been a struggle of mine for so long, and healing my relationship with food has really shown me that treating myself like I would treat somebody I love is so, so, so important. It has opened up so much for me because it just takes the pressure off.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Oh, I love it. All right, everybody, go re-listen to this because it was so full of incredible wisdom, and have a great day. Thank you so much, Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Katie.